homeschooling isn't always picture perfect. Welcome to Homeschooling with Dr. B, where we'll help you find solutions to the challenges you face and celebrate your successes with you. Now, please welcome your host, Dr. B.
Welcome, my tenacious homeschoolers. So today, I'm going to be addressing something that I always tell people they don't need to worry about, but people worry about it all the time. And I see a lot of comments on the subject matter, both on the Facebook groups and on my homeschool pages. And that is, which homeschool philosophy should I follow? My answer is always the same. Whichever one fits your family, but everybody wants to find out what the most common philosophies are. Most people, when we start, myself included, we start by doing regular school at home, which means we pattern ourselves a lot by our own experiences in traditional education and our children's experience in traditional education. We use lots of textbooks. We do a lot of testing. That always seems to be, or the majority of the time, that seems to be how most of us get started. We use that as our launching pad. Most of us don't stay there. In our case, in our family, we always have a classroom. Not necessarily because we're going to stick with the traditional methods, but because I have a child that has ADHD in the moderate to severe range, more severe than moderate, who's very hyperactive. And she functions better at a desk. Now, we often have comfortable chairs in the classroom as well. We've had some fabulous classrooms because we've lived in all kinds of different homes. We've always adjusted a little bit to her needs because she does need to feel that space. It's where she feels calmer, where she can focus, do what she's supposed to do. And I'm noticing that my 5-year-old bug feels the same way. He needs that space that says, it's school time, I need to focus, I need to get started, I need to get my work done, then I can go out and play. My 2 other daughters are not like that, but thankfully they're very flexible and they understand that their sister and their brother have the need for a classroom. Everybody's totally cool with it. That's what works for our family. So that aspect of a traditional textbooksy type situation, we've retained it because it works for our family. Now, I've seen a lot of debate on the Facebook groups about whether homeschooling online is really homeschooling. Yes, it is. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. That's the beautiful thing about homeschooling. You can do it however works best for your family. There's different types of online homeschooling. There's the kind where the kids go and see a video and they have to do assignments that they have to turn in. There's kinds of homeschooling online where there's an actual teacher teaching in real time. There's online homeschools where you could go at your own pace. There are other ones where you have to follow a certain schedule. Frankly, if you have the money, there's some really excellent programs that some traditional universities are putting out for homeschoolers, especially when they get to high school. Just absolutely fabulous programs that give your children a lot of opportunities and exposures to different styles of teaching. Now, I have to be honest with you, I've explored them, but my kids aren't starting high school till next year. In fact, I have 3 starting high school at the same time. The twins and my beautiful adopted daughter, who is now taller than me. Can you believe this? And they're 13 at the same time. Yep, that means they're starting high school at the same time. And they're going to leave me at the same time. Heartbreaking. Good thing I have bug. But the bottom line is that there's a plethora, many online programs to choose for. There's also the More Foundation. Now, the Moores are considered sort of like the grandparents of homeschooling. They were there in the beginning of the movement, and they provide a lot of support for homeschoolers. The kids, when they're young, have a lot more freedom. Doesn't mean that they're left to their own devices, but they have a lot more flexibility than they would in a traditional classroom. Then there's the Waldorf homeschooling program, where subjects are not separated, but they're integrated. I've used part of this system. For example, Narnia. My kids loved Narnia when they were younger. Out of a Narnia book, we would do vocabulary, we would do literature, we would do composition, we would do history, because the first two novels are during World War II. So we would include everything. There was another book that we did like that too, that the kids really enjoyed. It was called Counting the Stars. We've taken a little bit of that programming and incorporated it into our homeschooling, but we don't fully embrace it because all of it doesn't work for us. We just take what does work for us. Definitely the Waldorf homeschooling system emphasizes more experience in the early years than book learning. If that works for your family, that could be something you could explore or consider. The Charlotte Mason method, it's a lot about creating living groups, keeping journals of your explorations and science, and creating poetry. It is what I have found from the parents that do it is it's a more relaxed method. It didn't work for us because of Andy's ADHD. She's always really gravitated towards more structure. But just as suggested, we did introduce music, the theaters very early on. So, we took a little bit of that method as well. Unit studies also very popular among homeschool families. There have been times when we do this. More than anything in science, I don't like textbooks that teach a little bit of this science and a little bit of that science and a little bit of that. Because what I found was that my kids wouldn't retain the information as well. So when we did science, we focused on one thing. That was it. Like birds, or we focused on mammals, or we focused on chemistry, or we focused on astronomy. And we really delved into it as much as it was required and as much as the kids were interested. If they were really interested in the subject, we would explore it in a lot more in depth than if they were not interested in it. If they were not that interested in it, we did what we thought was required for that subject, but then we would move on to the next subject. And the kids really have enjoyed doing science on a unit type basis. The thing about the unit studies is that it also makes it easier to teach kids at different levels because you could be teaching the same unit, but expect different levels of progression, different projects or assignments from the kids based on their grade level. If you choose to do grade levels, some homeschoolers don't choose to do grade levels. Classical homeschooling, there's an amazing program out there called Classical Conversation. I really love some components of Classical Conversation. We've done some memory work. The kids love it. It really helped with their grammar. But not everything was for us. They do divide homeschooling into 3 different stages. The grammar stage, the logic stage, and the rhetoric stage. So they go through this process where they memorize and then they start applying things. One of the things that I really liked on the brief time that we did the program in a Classical Conversations community was that they did a lot of public speaking. And none of my kids have any type of a problem getting in front of an audience and speaking. Okay, now they're being surly teenagers, but that's another story. Unschooling. As you might have learned from a previous episode, I was unschooled for a couple of years. While I don't feel that I benefited greatly, I also don't discount the experiences that I had, which were generally positive. It just felt like educationally, it really held me back. That's something that can be confusing about unschooling. There's people who feel that unschooling is primarily a child-led homeschool type of system. Then there's the more radical unschoolers like my parents, where you're literally doing nothing except whatever the child wants to do. And in my case, it was nothing. I wanted to play. That's what I wanted to do for 2.5 years. I was fortunate in that I did learn a lot of things from my grandmother, but that was purely by accident, not by design. I have seen unschooling done very successfully in our homeschool communities here in Florida, but it's not something that my family is comfortable with. So we certainly have not incorporated any of those elements into our homeschooling system. As you might have been able to tell by now, I'm an eclectic homeschooler. Up until I found out that there was an actual term for the type of homeschooling that I do, I used to call myself the cannibal, because I would go and I would just take a little piece from here and a little piece from over there, and I would cannibalize all of these other philosophies or systems, and I would take what I thought was best for me, for my family, for my kids. The most important thing for me is adapt, be willing to improvise, and thrive. The rest is not relevant. It's just really not relevant. Don't get caught up in the philosophy. I love the Montessori system, and I incorporated some of the Montessori experiences early on in our homeschool journey. But when it didn't work for my kids anymore, I pitched it. I was not married to it. My commitment is to my children, not to a philosophy. I wish somebody would have told me that at the beginning, because at the beginning, I definitely wanted to do school at home. And people were like, if that's what you're comfortable with, that's what you should do. You should just go with it and create the school at your home. But then there were two problems. One is I overbought into the system, both curriculum, furniture, time, energy, that, you know what, down the line, it didn't even work. Back to what I said, adapt, improvise, and thrive. Bring into your homeschool philosophy what works for you and your family at that time. And always be willing to explore other ideas. Be willing to know that just because something worked great for a family doesn't mean that it's going to work great for you. Don't get caught up in this thing where people go, this is the best program ever. This is the way to do it. This is what you should be doing. Because the bottom line is that may not work for your kids. It may not work for your family. Be flexible. I really wish somebody would have said that to me. I feel like that first year when I was homeschooling, I was too rigid. I really thought there was only one way my kids were going to learn. If we did things the way that I had been taught, the traditional way. And that's how it successes in our homeschool program. But I've been successful exploring classical conversations, the Montessori method, the Waldorf method. At different stages, different things have worked for us. Keep in mind, more than anything else, that theory is one thing and practice is another. And this brings me to one of the best quotes I've ever heard, which was, I knew I was a great parent until God gave me 3 children. We all think that we know how to do things until we're actually doing them. Remember to be kind to yourself and to be kind to your children. You are learning and exploring as much as they are. Theory is one thing, practice is another. Whatever works for your family, whatever helps your children advance and excel. And by excel, I mean meet their goals and be happy. That's what you go with. That's what this is all about. More than anything, I would say to you, just relax. Breathe. You've totally got this. The most difficult part about homeschooling is getting out of your own way. If you relax, you'll accomplish that. And before you know it, you'll be an old pro helping someone else in their homeschooling journey. Hey, if you know somebody else who might need some help in their homeschool journey, please share my podcast. Let them know that they can find us on our blog or on YouTube. We can all use some help in this crazy journey that is homeschooling. Just remember, life can be overwhelming. Homeschooling doesn't have to be. Join us in our sometimes challenging, always exciting homeschool journey by subscribing to our podcast, blog, or YouTube channel. For links and resources, please visit our website. Till next time, enjoy your kiddos.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Homeschooling with Dr. B. Head over to homeschoolingwithdrb.com for more information and resources. That's homeschoolingwithdrb.com. Until next time.